right now. So you will have access to this information. And since this is a free webinar, thank you to anyone who donated, but you will be able to see this on our YouTube page. We also have next week where we are reading, the ONA Book Club is reading Jesus and the Disinherited by Howard Thurman. It's a classic text. It's a text that Martin Luther King used as part of his work. Legend has it that he walked around Crozer Theological Seminary with a copy of this book always. And we're reading it through a queer lens to see how we can use some of the ideas that Thurman presented in the current move for justice for the LGBTQIA plus SGL community. So we have several people who have signed up. We're super excited about that. That's on the 14th at 7. And also on the 21st, we have Reverend Timothy, who's an amazing social media figure and UCC pastor who does awesome things on TikTok and other socials. And he's presenting a webinar on how to use social media for your ministry. So you can sign up for that. That's on the 21st. And you can sign up on the 28th for another free webinar on bullying. You know, school's just started and it's really important. We have Mitch Leet, who is my counterpart in Room for All, which is a nonprofit that services the Reformed Church in America. And he is a person with trans experience who is going to be sharing lots of information that is helpful to congregations, to families, for some resources for dealing with bullies. So just want you to be aware of that. You can find any of those things on our Instagram page and our Facebook page where you can sign up. But today, I'm super excited to have a friend who I have known for a very long time, Brian Buford, who honestly was the very first person that I even came out of the closet to, like literally driving in the car. And he was on his way to a meeting and he's like, come on, hurry up. I'm like,
say it.
But Brian has just been amazing to me and so many people on their journey. He is the founding director of the University of Louisville's LGBT Center, which I brag. It's one of the premier campus LGBT centers because of the work that he did in setting up that center. It's the premier LGBT space for colleges in the South. At least that's what I say. It's my alma mater. They've done a really good work, and people go to that college because they know that it is has that center. So he's no longer at the center, but he's still doing the work. And so, Brian, take it away.
I'm so glad to be here, you all. Thank you so much for having me. And excited. This is thinking about increasing our spirit of inclusion for churches is really close to my heart, you all. I think one of my favorite sort of areas to one of those favorite sort of challenging spaces to be in is thinking about the bridge, between the LGBTQ community and communities of faith. And so I've loved those conversations. I have also learned a lot from Derek about how to do that work and how to do it thoughtfully, and how to be welcoming to folks who do not always feel or experience that spirit of welcome. So I'm thrilled to be here. I've been on my own journey as well around my own faith tradition. I grew up Southern Baptist. Um, got lots and lots of messages about my identity as a young Southern Baptist person. I went to a Southern Baptist college, uh, preparing for the ministry, and I moved here to Louisville, Kentucky. You all are not here, but Louisville is the home of a couple of seminaries, including a Southern Baptist seminary. So that's where I came to go to seminary, and that's where my own personal coming out journey began. I'll spoiler, I'll spoil the end of the story. I did not go to Southern Baptist Seminary. I came out of the closet instead and ended up at the University of Louisville, where I was given a talk one time and talked about how I once had a calling to the ministry, and someone said, "I think this is your calling to the ministry," and I think that's true. I think that has been true. Working with LGBT folks, um, helping people who are not LGBT think about how to be more welcoming. I called this Allyship 3.0, you all, because I suspect that you're here because you're already doing all kinds of things. You're already Ally 1.0 and 2.0. I suspect you're ready for 3.0. And so taking your inclusion to the next level is kind of what I wanted to think about with you all. Just quickly, I know we just have an hour together, but I do want to say, the world is changing in many ways. Certainly since I started my journey, the world has changed a lot. There's a lot of good news for us to build on. Just a few examples here. Workplace equality is now the law. In 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, the Supreme Court ruled that the Civil Rights Act also protected um, LGBT folks from discrimination. So lots of advances. This is not a political talk at all, so but I just want to note that this current administration has been expanding protection for LGBT people. So these are good. These are really good things. This is really positive news. More than ever before, we see LGBTQ people everywhere in film and television, in our elected officials. There are currently 3 LGBT governors in the country. MB, you've got one there in Denver. In Colorado. Uh, Federally, Pete Buttigieg is the first cabinet member with congressional approval. Out athletes across every sport now. I don't think there's a sport out there that we don't have some out athletes playing in, out musicians and singers. So this is huge, you all. I'm 59. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, never seeing myself reflected anywhere in the world. So these are all really positive things. This also, by the way, means that people in your churches are also much more aware than they used to be. We all see examples of queer life and people with their partners and things that we didn't used to see. And then, so let me just also jump in and say, and by the way, jump in at any point. I don't know if there's like a raise your hand feature here, but feel free to. This is not meant to be just a one-way conversation. But I do want to say there is also not good news. Listen, we have moved the needle incredibly in this country in many ways. And so sometimes I say it's like living in two realities. In some ways, everything has changed. And in some ways, the other reality is nothing has changed. Everything is the same. These statistics haven't moved since I've been doing this work now 17 years. Um, LGBT youth are now still 3 times more likely to consider suicide. These are, by the way, also youth. We're also considering young college students, folks who you might be wanting to welcome into your congregations. 4.5 times more likely to attempt suicide, twice as likely to feel sad or hopeless, 4.5 times more likely to make a suicide attempt that results in a doctor's treatment. When we think about transgender young folks, 8 times more likely to attempt suicide. 70%, 78% of them in grades K through 12 are reporting harsh harassment, uh, which often includes physical assault or sexual violence. I just saw a study, it's not in here, but I just saw a study the other day of the percentage of transgender folks who are assaulted by their doctor. We're talking about really high percentages here, and not just verbal assault, but physical assault by a doctor. 15% of trans students are leaving school because they just can't handle the harassment, and then half of those, we're talking about homelessness here. So I think it's important for us to know that we are dealing with many of our most vulnerable folks. Those of us who are called to ministry, called to care um, for the the least among us. We're talking about really vulnerable um, young people here when they come in. I also want to mention this that we're at a point in our country. This just blows me away. The political rhetoric, the national movement to legislate anti-LGBT movements is on the rise. Look at this. In 2018, just a couple years ago, nationwide there were 41 anti-LGBT bills filed. In 2022, I created this particular presentation in 2022, and I had stopped at 340. Now, here in 2023, there are already more than 566 bills. Some of them are failing, many of them are passing. I live in a state where some of them have failed and some of them have passed. Um, Many of these are about access to health care, about who can play sports in our country and what teams they have to play on. There are still bathroom bills about people are still filing bathroom bills about what bathroom people can use. Some states here in Kentucky, we had an like trying to ban drag performances. I live just north of Tennessee. In Tennessee, they passed um, a bill banning drag performances. And so we are in a time where things are very, very serious for LGBT people. So let me say this. I was thinking about just some of the things that if I think about allyship 3.0 for you all, a couple of things that I just want you to be thinking about. I want you to think about, I know you're here because you want to welcome folks to your churches. You want the message to be that this is a place where you're going to be safe, you're going to be supported, you're going to have a great experience. People are going to love you here. That's, of course, what we want our LGBT college students to experience when they come. And so here are a couple things that I just think we could talk about a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about the binary. I think this is a great space to be in for a minute as we start to try to dismantle in our churches the things that can become barriers that we don't even know. We were all raised to think in binary. So we all absorbed it. We all have it in us. And we've got to really actively work on breaking that. We've got to get good at pronouns. I see some of you. Cindy's got she, her, or Cindy's pronouns. She's got those in her little Zoom signature line there. Uh, I see the they, them there, and yours, Derek, or is that's for the coalition staff? They, them. That's awesome. So we're going to talk about how important pronouns are and how we all need practice. Like we all need to practice, me included. We'll think about some ways to be a little bit louder so that LGBT people can hear you. Um, we'll talk about what welcome means and how we make sure that people can receive and absorb the message of welcome. And then I'm calling my last one for you all. Don't start with sin. So I'll tell you more about that one as we get close to it. I'll leave that as a little cliffhanger. So, of course, so tip number one, breaking the binary. I want us to think about how many things in our world are binaries and how easy it is to put people in a box of being one thing or the other thing and not thinking about how limiting that is. So let's start. Let's think. I thought it might be fun for us for just a minute, and we'll use the chat for this, you all, just as a way to participate together. We're all going to come out together here a little bit around one part of our identity. And that is, I want to know, friends, are you a dog person or a cat person? So let's go ahead and post in the, Cindy is like right out of the box, dog person, dog person. Pastor Lori says both. Jenny says both. I didn't say both, by the Jenny, I didn't, we didn't have a box for both here. Um, We have two, okay, two puppies at this point. Okay, dog person, cat person. Pastor, did you weigh in on where do you fit in this binary? Dog person. Okay, good, good, good. Well, listen, so this is a fun example. Um, but I suspect, well, we have several of you who don't fit into these binaries. So we can think about this as not boxes that we're in, but actually a continuum, a spectrum of people. So dog person and cat person is actually a spectrum. And let's look at some of the things that we could be on the spectrum. You could be like a few of you here. Jenny, for example, says, I like both. Jenny, you didn't say if you like them both equally or not. You could be on the spectrum. You could like dogs and cats and be a little bit more of a cat person or a little bit more of a dog person. Um, no one here has said, nope, don't like either. I don't like either one of them. I'm off. Take me off. I'm off the spectrum. Um, someone might say, look, I did like a dog once, but that was way back in college, and I've never liked another dog since then. I just went through a phase, right? Cats are cool at a difference. Somebody could have said, look, I'm a fish person. This is not working for me. Some of you might say, I'm questioning, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I like cats or dogs, right? The point here is that when we talk about things like gay and straight, uh, man and woman, I'm going to say black and white, um, Democrat and Republican. We have lots and lots of binaries, and we have to remember that those don't work for real people. Um, our young folks, our young college folks, you all are, they love to bust the binary. They love to live outside of the binary. They are fearless in sort of breaking down these barriers and thinking about them differently. So we also have to think about how do we break that binary with LGBT folks and thinking about. So, here's just some thoughts here as we think about, you know, just a few tips here, especially as we think about inviting people in who are on the trans spectrum. And remember that that's not a binary either. You're not trans, there's not transgender and cisgender. But one of the things we do is we start to live in that binary of what male and female is, or trans or cisgender. And just a couple tips I wanted to give you. The first one is to really start to be very mindful and thoughtful about how often we try to guess somebody's gender. We see someone, we see what clothes they're wearing, how their hair is styled, and we make guesses all the time, don't we? And here's the thing, a great percentage of the time, you get it right. We have enough cultural cues built in there. People, have ways of communicating their gender to us, but sometimes we get it wrong. And when we get it wrong, we call that misgendering. So when we make a guess and we get it wrong, so instead of that, there's this old men's health magazine that I used to read, and it had instead like don't eat this, eat that. It's like don't eat a cheeseburger, eat 7 sweet potatoes. And so this was my version of that. Instead of don't do this, do this. Instead of guessing, ask folks how they identify. And by the way, you can go first. That's the best way to ask. So how that would look is I might say, I can use my pronouns. I could say, hey, Derek, I'm Brian. I use he, him, and his. Tell me about you. And Derek could then share how they identify. Um, you could say, I identify as, I'm male identified, and then invite people to share. So instead of guessing, um, getting in the habit of asking that question. Some of you who maybe, pastor or give sermons in your congregations. Um, when we're interacting with our congregation, we do this a lot. And so it's something we want to really pull in. Um, Instead of saying that because I'm not part of the LGBTQ community or I'm not a trans person, saying that I'm just boring or normal. Well, I don't have anything interesting. I'm just normal. Um, those are not great titles. It make the because the contrast to that is, and then a trans person is what, like exotic or um, you know, something to be observed. And so instead of that, let's all start using the term cisgender. Cisgender is the word that identifies someone who's not trans or non-binary. So great thing to do. I can say, hey, as a cisgender person, I want to be a great ally to my trans folks. I'm saying, hey, I'm speaking today from the perspective of someone who's cisgender. It gives us a word. It gives us a word to identify. One of the great privileges of a majority identity is you don't need a word to describe yourself. And so we can push back on that by using the term cisgender. These are things, I'm sure these are things you all already know. I just want to cover them, asking people about their real name, asking them, we also, a lot of trans folks will refer to that as their dead name because that is a name that refers to someone that they are not anymore. So instead of asking someone to tell us their real name, just ask folks the name they use. I do this, I host a lot of folks for trainings, and I really don't always even trust what's on the sign-in sheet or if I've gotten a list of registrations. I still ask people, what name do you use? Because I want to get that right. The name on that form, they may not have had the opportunity yet to update things. Of course, never asking someone if they've had a plan, they've had surgery or had a plan for surgery. I can tell you some of the most wonderful people I know um, have made this misstep because we get interested when we meet someone who's transgender. We get interested and we start wondering, and just think about whether you'd ask any other person about their private medical procedures, and be guided by that same sort of protocol. And then here's a good one for all of us who are preaching or ministering or speaking to groups. um, Start to think about your language. When you're in that room, you're asking people to raise their hand and you say, yes, sir. The guy back in the back there, the lady in the second row, men and women, boys and girls come together. What are we doing? We're like recreating that binary when we do that. So something, this takes practice, you all, but instead I try to use friend a lot. So, hey, my friend in the back there, you there in the blue shirt, colleague. Sometimes I call people a colleague because it's more gender inclusive. Um, I'm going to tell you all this one. I live in the South, and so this one is a big deal. But my mom raised me. Derek knows my mom well. She raised me to say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and yes, sir, and no, sir. And I'm going to tell you in the South, if you don't say yes, sir, no, sir, with some folks, you're in trouble. Um, but let me tell you, it's problematic, isn't it? Because when I say yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, I'm making a guess. I'm making a guess about that person's identity. I'm putting them in a binary.
Can I add
So,
something before I answer?
yes,
Can I say
yes,
something? Just looking at this list, I think of the young adults who I encountered doing this work, but who come to my church, and they are huge in dismantling the binary.
yes, they are.
Even even some of my most progressive church members who have been feminists for years and doing anti-racism work for years sometimes struggle with the non-binary and the trans
Yes,
identity. I have
yes,
a friend recently, who's like, "Oh, my granddaughter is doing this, but I think it's more political. I think it's more this. I think it's more that." And I'm always like, "It doesn't matter what you think the why is. If that's how they would like to identify, that's how they choose to identify. I believe that
yeah,
the good thing to do is to love and support. You don't have to understand it. You don't have to make it
yeah,
logical."
yes, yes. Thank you so much. I think that's so important. Okay, so let's keep going here. So the next tip, of course, is getting good at pronouns. And this really, again, speaks to Derek's point here that our young folks, our college students, have gotten so good at and have stumbled so little and just embraced this idea of being good at our pronouns. And for some of us, it's more challenging. Again, it's because we've learned how to think about the world in a particular way. But pronouns communicate a lot, and the use of pronouns communicates a lot. So, we've got a few pronoun sets here to think about: he, him, and his, of course, she, her, and hers, they, them, and their. There are other pronoun sets. I just included Z and Zir here as one of them. Where I'm living here in Kentucky, I'm not seeing those. I'm not seeing a lot among young folks yet, these other constructed pronoun sets. But I will say I'm seeing a lot of they, them, and their. And I think this they, them, and their is the one that I think we're all can do better at. And we need practice to do better. We can do it. We just need to practice. This one's challenging for some folks because um, they're used to only using they, them, and their when they're talking about multiple people, perhaps. But with practice, so let me say, I want to give you some thoughts here. And how do we know someone's pronouns? We ask, and we ask by sharing ours. I'm Brian. I use he and him. Um, so happy you're here. Tell me about you. And then folks can share them, may not share them, um, and we can just follow. Then we follow suit with them. So I have two ideas for ways to practice. The first one is the easier one. So I want you to know how easy it can be to use they, them, and their as a pronoun set. We actually do it all the time when we don't know the gender of a person yet, when we haven't been given that piece of information. Here's my little game you can play with yourself. Imagine that you are, cleaning up at the end of church and there's a cell phone sitting on one of the pews and you don't know whose cell phone it is. So you pick up the cell phone. And what are some of the things you say? Maybe I turn to Derek. We're at church. I find the cell phone. I'm like, Derek, I found a cell phone. Um, Whoever they are, I bet they're so worried about it. How are we going to find them? Um, Maybe they've got some contacts in their phone that we can look through. Maybe we can call them. Um, See how quickly we just default to they, them, and their because we don't already have an idea about the gender of this person. So as you're trying to get more comfortable, play the I just found a cell phone game and say a bunch of just talk about it. Who do you think they are? Why did they leave it? You think they're coming back? Maybe they'll come back. I don't know. When they realize it, they might come back. So we easily transition to they, them, and their in this instance. The reason why it's tricky is that we have all these cultural identifiers of gender, and that makes us want to use the pronouns we're comfortable with. So here's this is the hard next level practice. And if we had more time, I'd have us do it here today, but I want you to practice this with somebody in your life. This is next level. So I want you to talk to someone talk about someone you know well, find a partner, someone at home, and say, hey, I need to practice my pronouns. I'm going to talk about someone I know well using only they and them. So in my case, since Derek knows my mom well, I think, by the way, I think moms are a good person to choose because man, I mean, we've got like lots of set gender ideas about our moms, right? So practice with someone that you know it's going to be hard, that their gender is really a sort of a key part of how you know them. Um, so I might say, listen, my mom is an incredible person. They're kind to everyone they meet. They've always been there for me. I have to really actually I do this training often and I always have to really think, okay, wait a minute. My mom, they, them, and their. So talk about your mom for a while. Talk about someone who you really know well and use they, them. It's just good practice. It helps us sort of break our tendency to default to the pronouns we think are correct. Make sense? Okay. And then what about this, you all? I might ask some of you if you've ever messed up. Have you ever been in a situation? I think this is our biggest fear. I think the thing that we don't want to do is ever cause harm, or we don't want students to tell us. I might ask you to share a little bit about that. Listen, I got to tell you, I mess up all the time too, because I work with young folks, and sometimes I'm meeting them, and this may be true for you as well. You may be meeting them at the beginning of a journey and not at the end of a journey. And at the beginning of a journey, young folks who are 18, 19, 20 years old are still discovering themselves. They're still exploring who they are. And so sometimes those students will come to me with a name and pronouns. And at some point, as they continue that journey, they might say, Brian, I want you to, I'm going by this name and these pronouns. I want you to adjust. And that could happen a couple of times in my relationship with them. Derek, I'm sure you've had folks you've worked with as well, where those pronouns and those names are changing. And also, let me just tell you, just in case you don't know this, college students also will not always give you the grace, that you deserve for messing up. But you know what? So what do we do if we mess up? Um, I love this comment here, learning how to provide the appropriate information to someone next to me who just messed up. Yeah, so what do we do when there's a mess up? Um, so what my students would tell me is they do want me to acknowledge that I've messed up. Acknowledge. Wait a minute, I'm so sorry, I got that wrong. But they don't want me to create the dramatic, like an Oscar-winning performance of dismay, that I think like it's not the end of the world. Messing up is not the end of the world. You will recover. And in fact, if you make it a huge deal, sometimes you compound the harm, especially in front of others. If you make a scene in front of others and you're just, like, I don't know, just, on the floor with agony, you've made it all about you, and it's not all about you. And two, you've made it you've done more harm. So this is really tricky, isn't it? An appropriate level of acknowledgement and apology. And also for me, I like to say, um, hey, I'm sorry, I do want to get this right. If I do it again, will you let me know? I want to send the message. I am open. I am willing to be corrected, and it's okay. So that's it, really. Beyond that, just know that even LGBT folks, even trans folks mess up pronouns for other trans folks. We do, and it's okay. The way you show up and the spirit you show up with is really okay. Anybody want to share about a mess up? Or want to say anything about when you've messed up? I like this idea of like helping someone else who's messed up. That's also a nice. Um, I am often, with others who are making some errors around pronouns, and I can just sort of whisper to them, uh, they, them, they, them. I keep that going, helping others do better. Anybody want to share?
Cindy
Cindy, I see
just
your
came
camera.
on
Yeah.
camera.
Yeah, Cindy.
Yeah, we had a temporary staff person who is non-binary, and I referred to them as she in a staff meeting. And I'm head of staff and a lesbian, so I should know better in two different ways. And they fortunately called me on it, and I apologized on the spot and said I'd do better. And then after the meeting, so that I wouldn't make it all about me, after the meeting, I went and I apologized again, and they said it's okay. And I said, no, it's not okay. And if I will try to do better, and if I make the same mistake, please call me. I expect you to call me on it again. So
Good.
fortunately, I didn't, but
Cindy,
I
that
still
sounds,
felt bad as head of staff to
of
not set a better
course.
example.
Of course. Of course you do. Yes, of course. It sounds like a really beautiful handling of it, though. to acknowledge it, to privately sort of, ask for that, just to say it's okay to tell me. I love it. I love it.
And
Derek, you said you mess up all the time.
yeah, all the time. And I just want to say, and as a pastor, I grew up in the Black church tradition. So brothers and sisters and
Mm,
all, that type of language, which 20 years ago was so inclusive and made people feel warm and fuzzy. But in my current congregation, I have people with trans experience, I have people non-binary. And of course, we use inclusive language in the Bible. Sometimes I forget that when I'm preparing the bulletin or putting it up on the screen. Sometimes I identify someone as he or she, and I know that they identify as they. And I think what Brian said, that whole idea of apologizing and acknowledging and not making them more uncomfortable by,
mhm.
oh my God, I'm so sorry, like making it even bigger. But I will say, to Brian's point, with college students, especially, and I hate to be like, I'm an old millennial, so I hate to be like these Gen Zers, but Gen Z is different. Like every generation is different. And because of, TikTok and the emboldening, and I love it. Sometimes they stand up for themselves in a way that for some generations can be off-putting,
Yeah,
and especially in a church setting. So I'm just like, so just be prepared. Like that grace may not be extended the way that it was for Cindy. So if that is what happens, and you're, as you're working with this population, to understand the hurt, the pain, like, where they're coming from, and how to address that, um, with them. Because
yeah,
sometimes it can, yeah, it is a big deal to misgender someone. And when people don't practice the good manners of, oh, that's okay. I mean, I had an incident in church where I messed up hugely, and I was called out after service by a visitor. Um, and so, yeah, and I took it and apologized and said, I'll do better. And other people saw how I handled that, and they were like, and were impressed. But yeah, it was not
I love
easy.
it. You're making a great point too. Other people are watching, not just the person that you've misgendered, but others. And so modeling that it's okay, and that we can recover, we can apologize, really sends a message to other people as well. So that person may not give us grace, but we can give ourselves grace, and those of us who are in community with each other can also give grace to one another. So I try to normalize that, as much as possible. So okay, let's keep going here. So it's okay to mess up. So the next tip I want to share with you is to get a little bit louder. You may feel like we are sending a really clear message, and I want to encourage you to send it a little bit louder. Let me show you. Um, here's a church welcome sign. I actually this I was thinking about this for you all because I had a friend. I did a workshop, a trans allyship workshop, not too long ago, and I was in an office building, and someone at the end of the session said, "Come here, I want to show you what's on my office door." So we went over. I said, "Yeah, yeah, I want to see." So we went over, and on her office door was a sign that said, "Welcome." And she said, "See that sign? It says welcome." And I said, "Yes, I, I see that. I see the word welcome. What up?" And she said, "Well, that means all are welcome. It doesn't have to say gay. It doesn't have to say black. It doesn't have to say trans. It just says welcome. Welcome is welcome." And I picked this one too because this actually says all are welcome on this sign. But can I tell you all something? When I see a church with a sign that says all are welcome, my default is I don't believe that's me. I don't
Mm,
believe that they mean queer folks are welcome. I suspect there are other marginalized identities that when they see all are welcome, they think that means everybody but me. And part of that is the evidence of my own experience that I have been in lots of churches where I wasn't welcome. I've been in those spaces where I wasn't welcome. So what I told my friend, the welcome sign on her door, I said, that's a great, I love that sign. It's great. It's just that the people who see it have had experiences where the sign said welcome, but the experience said not welcome. And so we have to over message. And we also have to communicate that we understand that who all are. We have to say we understand that all doesn't just mean all people who look like me and live like me and love like me. That all are folks who are not like me. So we have to message pretty strongly. Now, let me say that I think sometimes, I hope you like this. Sometimes I think that we worry as folks who are in, part of a church, that this is what I'm talking about, that I'm sort of suggesting that a rainbow must explode in your sanctuary. I don't mean that, but I do mean a rainbow flag is not a bad thing, y'all. Because a message beyond all are welcome is not a bad thing. If you're trying to reach people who have historically or systematically been excluded, you have to communicate. You have to over communicate. You have to be explicit and specific. So maybe not this. I'm not saying this, but here's this is the space where our LGBT center started on our campus at the University of Louisville. And see that little rainbow flag by the door there? That door is to the intersection, which is what the name of our center was. And there's a little rainbow flag there. And there was a really lovely, kind custodian who used to come into the office every morning and say, Brian, you need to get a big ass flag. That flag is too dinky. He was an ally. He was an ally galore. He's like, need to get a big flag. And I said, it doesn't have to be a big flag. It doesn't have to be overpowering. I'm going to tell you, LGBTQ people can see a rainbow flag for miles away, but not to have a clear, but no flag. I assume no welcome. Does that make sense? I think I'm not saying this is especially fair, but it is the reality. I am cautious. I scan the environment wherever I go to check my safety.
what we
Um,
always say to churches, because churches always become on and say, "Do I have to get a flag?" And what I always say to churches is that it's a clear way of letting people know this is a safe place.
yes.
Like, because to me, if you say you're safe, if you say you're welcome, I'm going to go on your website and I'm going to see, because churches have caused harm for a lot of LGBTQ people. And so if I go to your website and I don't see anything that is reflective, then I feel like if I go there, am I going to, is there going to be like a conversion attempt? Can I
Yes.
bring my partner and put my arm around his shoulder? Can we get, there are all these, they're just little markers that this
That's
is a
right.
safe place.
That's
And
right.
it does put you, because some people say, oh, we might be vandalized. It does put you at a
Yeah.
place where that could happen. But I always say it's standing on the side of the oppressed. It's standing with Jesus at the cross,
That's right.
saying we're taking the risk.
And if love that so much. If you want people to come, they have to know that you mean them. They have to know that you mean them and that you understand them. And is there risk? Of course. I think you all were vandalized at one point at your church,
Yeah,
Pastor.
we were vandalized a few times. And the last time my office was ransacked, but the people in the community, because they love our space, and we have trans flag, black national flags, rainbow flags.
Mm,
People in the community raised $11,000 to help us
wow.
to secure our
Mm,
space and to ensure the
whew.
flags. So it was it wasn't good, but the support and the love outweigh the negativity and the hate.
Totally agree. Totally agree. So think about a rainbow flag, of course. It's an easy, as Derek said, it's for us, it's our universal symbol. we look for it. Think about other like kinds of visibility, how you can take it to the next level. Do you have a website? Are there photographs on your website? Are there photographs of queer people? Are there family photos, and are any of those families LGBTQ families? I go to websites all the time before I go anywhere. Before I go to a resort, before I go to a conference, I go look to see am I represented here? Look at your membership rosters. How are you identifying folks there? Is it Mr. and Mrs. Blotty Blotty? Is it inclusive? Think about your church traditions and how inclusive they might be. Um, all those symbols and signage, those are all opportunities to message. Who do you invite as guest speakers? Do people see themselves? This is a big one for me. If nobody ever invites a queer person to speak, um, I think I'm the host of a podcast now, and I'm always thinking about the guests that I invite. I want to send the message that everyone has something to say. And so thinking really broadly and inclusively about my guest speakers. And then also think about the communities that you're in where there are events like Pride. I'm sure, hopefully, all of you live in a community with some kind of Pride celebration. And do you show up there? Are you there? Can people see folks wearing your church t-shirt? Do you have a little booth? Do you walk in the parade? I mean, we could really tier all kinds of um, allyship messages that could come by going to where LGBT folks are in your community and being a part there, welcoming them, joining in their celebrations as well. Okay, I know we're short on time, so this is I really feel strongly about this one, you all, and can I say I'm a little nervous to talk about this because I want to honor everyone's tradition here. So my last tip is don't start with sin. And let me tell you a little story and then we'll talk about what I mean by it. In my first year at the LGBT Center at U of L, I met and started having a regular coffee date with the director of Baptist Campus Ministries. He was a white, heterosexual, cisgender man. And he reached out to me and he said some students had come to the Baptist Campus Center and said that they felt like they couldn't go to the LGBT Center. And I said, well, let's work. I think that's really cool. Let's work on that together. It's a Southern Baptist guy, which of course, like harkened back to my Southern Baptist life as well. We came up with the two of us together came up with this idea of inviting students to do what we had been doing, which was getting together regularly and telling each other our stories, really just talking about our lives to each other. And so we came up with a project that we called Swapping Stories. And now, of course, we were in a little bit of a binary here because we said there are LGBT students and there are Southern Baptist BCM students on our campus. And of course, that's not exactly true. That's not a binary either, but we were doing the best we could at the time. And we said, we're going to pair a student from the LGBT Center and a student from Baptist Campus Ministries together and give them $10 to go have lunch together. We did that. We had about 30 pairs of students who did that. And the first piece of advice, we gave them a little bit of parameters. The goal of the lunch is to share your story with each other. If you're a queer student, it was telling your coming out story. If you are a Southern Baptist Christian student, it might be sharing your testimony and sharing your experience of salvation, however you think about that. The rule was you can't challenge one another's story. Our stories are our stories. Be curious, ask a lot of questions, learn everything you can about each other's stories. And for the Christian students, my advice was don't start with sin. As you're asking questions, some of those Christian students said, I just feel like, I just feel compelled to say, like, I'm hearing all this, but I just need to say the Bible is very clear that this is a sin. And I said, that could be true. You can believe that. That can be you can hold that belief. That can be a value that you hold. And guess what? You get to have that. So if that's where you're coming from, you get to have that. But if you start with sin, if you go to that lunch and your first conversation with that person is the Bible says it's a sin, guess what's going to happen? You're never going to have another lunch. You're going to lose that person. On the contrary, you can start with love. You can start with curiosity. You can start with, tell me more. I want to hear everything. I want to know all about this. Tell me more. Um, you can start with, let's figure out what we've got in common. And what happens is you start to build a relationship with that person. You start with sin, no relationship, end. One lunch and you're done. You start with curiosity. You start with, uh, tell me more. You start to build a relationship. And guess what? The day will come when you have a relationship and a container and an emotional investment in one another that is strong enough that you can talk to each other about the things you disagree on. And you will have at some point a space and a relationship that will hold up if you say, I was raised to think this is a sin. That relationship can manage it. But a brand new relationship, when you start with sin, is over. So I don't know where you all are in your, in your communities or your theology, and I certainly could see how someone would come to the conclusion that the Bible says being gay is a sin. What I want to say though is, as you think about being welcoming and affirming and going to the next level, the place to start is the place of love. Build that relationship, and then those more difficult conversations can happen later. Does that make sense, you all?
And hopefully none of our churches think that. Now, there may be individuals in the church, especially if you're ONA, you go into the ONA process. There are definitely people in the church who think that. And that's the way to bring them, not necessarily on the board, but to make sure that they don't cause harm um, in the
Yeah.
church. Whenever a church becomes the open and affirming church in the UCC, 90 we expect at least 95% of the congregation to vote that we are to vote on the covenant, that we are open and affirming to queer people regardless of their race, gender
Beautiful.
expression, sexual orientation. Some have polyamory in their covenant, and so they've gone through a year-long process that
Beautiful.
hopefully, like Brian said, can get you to that point. But in the meantime, that's a wonderful remembrance, because sometimes that's exactly where people start.
That's right.
That's okay, but it's still a sin, and it's like, well, and now you just ostracized.
Yeah.
Before you go, Brian, in 2 minutes, can you talk about the alternative Thanksgiving and
Yes.
I think
Yeah,
that would be really helpful to the churches to hear.
absolutely. So this is in the category of like really thinking about where these college students are in their lives at this time. Um, I didn't share all these statistics, but there, the number of folks who are kicked out of their homes, are not welcome during the holidays, is still high. Um, surprisingly high, surprisingly high. We had so many queer college students at the University of Louisville that it was like right before Thanksgiving one year, and someone started asking, like, what are you all doing for Thanksgiving? And we realized that half the students in the room were not going anywhere for Thanksgiving because they weren't welcome home at the holidays. Their family had either, disowned them, told them they had to be straight before they could come home, whatever it was. And so we created an alternative Thanksgiving. So sometimes what you all are doing for folks is you're creating healthier, more loving, more, unconditionally safe spaces to experience the things that we all want to experience. We all want to sit down at the table and have a meal with people who love us and appreciate us. And we had lots and lots of students. Some of the folks who come to you are going to be folks who don't have family relationships, who don't have homes to go to. And so thinking about how you roll that out. I think thank you for that, Derek. I do think it's important and a huge success. I mean, just something so many people wanted to be a part of. We could have had 45 roasted turkeys because everybody wanted to bring those kids a turkey because they hear that story and want them to know that they're loved. So thank you for that, Derek.
Thank you. I oh, oh man, I went to a couple of alternative Thanksgivings, and I think it's really important. The coalition is really encouraging churches to think of how you go to college students, especially around the holidays, especially Thanksgiving, Christmas,
Yeah.
welcome week in colleges, like those times where if your family is, you're estranged from your family, the church can provide a really safe place to find community and to be connected to God's love. I am doing this type of work right now because Brian Buford came
Mm.
to me at the church I pastored in Louisville, Kentucky, in a non-affirming denomination, and said there are people, students at U of L, who are missing the God piece, and I think coming to our church and hearing your message would help them. And I thought, oh my God, I can't do that. I could lose my ordination or I can do this. But we started creating opportunities,
You did.
and it was so powerful. We would watch a movie and then have a speak back where students told their stories. And it was really helpful to people in the congregation. It was really healing to people, to the students. We started having those church healing, church hurt services, not just for queer people, but with
Yes.
people who have been hurt in church to come and just speak out in the name of Take Back the Night. Get behind the mic and say, this happened to be in church. And we, in a church setting, help them to heal
So
from that.
great.
So,
Yes.
just thinking of ways, because everyone always says, oh, how do we get people in? How do we get people in? And my thing is go out and create and think of
That's right.
alternative Thanksgivings and think of things that you can do in the community and take those things that Brian gave us, those tools of, not misgendering people in the language, because understanding as you meet people where they are, you don't want to ostracize, alienate, offend, or, push them away. So,
Yes.
ah, this was good stuff. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you. I thank all of you really. I'm so encouraged to see faith leaders who are just thinking about this so much. I love seeing this message that you all at your church are doing Trans Day of Remembrance in November right before Thanksgiving. That's so great. That's so great. So important. Um, my LGBT community still needs to have that connection to their spiritual identity. It's an important part of us, a healthy part of us. And so you all are helping reconnect them. I appreciate it.
And lastly, before we go, the coalition is working on a guidance. We're encouraging faith communities to have naming ceremonies, to host naming ceremonies in your congregations for people of trans experience. It can be really powerful for people to be able to come in a
Mm.
church setting and be called the name that they feel called by God to use in a spiritual setting. We had one with Indianapolis at Synod, and it was so beautiful, just for people to be affirmed in that way. And we think that if you open it up to people in your community, it's a way for them to find healing and for your church to help people to find healing. And so November is Trans Awareness Month and Trans Day of
Yeah.
Remembrance and all of that. So that's a perfect time to do more. So just wanted to close on that thought. Brian's email he showed on the screen. It's
Mm.
brian.buford@louisville.edu. Is that right?
I'll put it here in the chat. So you all have it.
Awesome.
I'd love to be supportive in any way I can, so please reach out to me. Um,
Woohoo.
yes.
Thank you all again, and take care, and God bless. This will, if you signed up, you will get a link tomorrow with the YouTube so that you can watch it and share it in your communities. And if there's anything that your church is doing and you need a little bit of assistance or help, or you're trying to re-energize your commitment to this type of work, you can always reach out to me at ONA at open and affirming, all spelled out, .org, and check out our website, which will be new and improved in just a few weeks, openandaffirming.org. So take care and God bless everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Peace.